My name is Amy Fox, and I'm the Graduate Program Advisor for the Aquatic and Fishery Sciences Master's and PhD program at the University of Washington.
And my name is Stephen Roberts, and I'm the Graduate Program Coordinator. And with us, we also have John. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is John Trukta, and I am a PhD candidate in Trevor Branch's lab.
And Yamini?
And then I'm Yamini. I am a PhD candidate in Stephen Roberts' lab.
Thanks. So the goal for this is just to give a kind of a brief and succinct overview of the graduate program in the School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences. So with that, Amy, would you like to kick it off?
Yeah, the first point that I would love to make for prospective students is that we are a very research-focused program. And because we're so research-focused, it means that there aren't any specific lists of prerequisites that new students would need to have in order to apply. The range of research that's being conducted is so wide that it would be kind of impossible to have a succinct list of prerequisites for every graduate student. But that also means that graduate students are admitted to do research with a specific faculty member. That doesn't mean that you have to have your research plan totally spelled out before you apply, but it does mean that once you are accepted, you're going to have a good sense of what your research project is and who you're going to be doing that with. And it also means that once you're accepted into the program, our list of requirements once you're here is somewhat small in order to allow for enough room for you to do a self-designed plan of study in order to really support that specific research project. How was that for you, John and Yamini? Was that something that you liked about the program? Was it clear when you started that that's how the program was going to be?
Yeah, it's something that definitely made me choose this program over others because I wanted to be able to customize what I learned about so it would be useful. I didn't want to take classes that maybe could be useful, but I wanted to know that the things that I was learning were in the classroom were directly applicable to what I was doing in lab and for my research. I think that you don't realize just how flexible and easy it is to customize your plan of study until you actually start doing it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Yamini. And I'd like to add that it's what I really appreciate about the research-based program at SAFS is that there's very specialized courses and close collaboration and integration with federal agencies such as NOAA and USGS and scientists from there and how they lead courses, and you learn the career skills was something that really appealed to me about this program as well.
And then because it's so research-focused, that's why faculty members make the individual decisions about who to accept or offer admission into their lab specifically, which is why it's always a good idea to start your process trying to figure out if the SAFS graduate program is the right fit by you by reaching out directly to faculty members first.
I will say, yeah, no, that's an excellent point, Amy. And many of the faculty have more about what they do on their websites that is easily accessible, but also you'll see a lot of the, faculty in our department also have information about specifically for prospective students. And so please have a look at that. And just, we can't overemphasize enough how important it is to contact them early and have specific questions about what it's like, what the possibilities are in that lab. In addition to faculty, it's also critical to reach out to current grad students.
Hey, Stephen, as a faculty member, I'd like to ask, how early is early?
That's an excellent question. So I never tell students it's too early. Normally the summer before is kind of the earliest is when I would get comments, but even the spring before, if people reach out to me, I'm happy to give them information and follow up with them.
I also recommend that every prospective student reach out to current graduate students. They are your best resource for what life is like in our program, and then specifically what life is like in each lab and working with each faculty member. John and Yamini, how do you prefer to have prospective students reach out to you, and what questions do you think they should be asking?
I think email is the first obvious mode of communication and one that's easy to get a response with, since that's how we're communicating nowadays, mostly. And I think My one piece of advice is pretty generic, but don't be afraid to ask about anything from the advising style to personality traits. It's important to get the personal feel of the lab and how the interactions occur. And I think it's important to address that because you're going to be working for at least 2 to 3 years under stressful conditions at times, and you don't want to have the added stress of dealing with interpersonal relationships that are not great.
Yeah, I usually get a couple emails from prospective students, which I definitely appreciate because I loved how current graduate students helped me out when I was applying. And if prospective students aren't asking about the good and bad and the ugly, I will give it to them anyways. And I think at least at SAFS, there are many graduate students who are willing and ready to tell you everything you need to know about the program and the potential and the people that you're interested in working with. I would also say that if cold emailing a professor kind of scares you from the beginning, I suggest emailing the graduate students first. They're more your peers and they will be your peers, and perhaps they can give you tips as well. So like how to best frame your email to a potential faculty member if you're not getting enough from their website, or even if you still don't feel confident doing so.
Along the lines of faculty, I think we've already hit on this, but in our particular department, ultimately, the faculty makes the decision if they have funding in place and if there's opportunities in lab for prospective students to come into their lab. So that's why we really don't have a kind of overarching prerequisite of the courses that you have to take. It's going to be a custom fit for the particular lab. And just to follow up what we said earlier, to contact them, it can come into there's different ways you would come in, maybe on a specific project, maybe not, maybe open up. And that kind of ties very nicely into the kind of the funding. And what are kind of the options for funding?
The first is a research assistantship, and that's a pretty straightforward traditional research assistantship where a faculty member has a grant and a project, and you get hired to contribute to that grant, and your research that you're doing for the RA-ship is your thesis or your dissertation. That involves a stipend, covers your tuition, and also pays for your health insurance. Another way that students are funded is through our internal SAFS fellowship. In order to be considered for the fellowship, all you have to do is apply to the program. By applying to our program, you're applying to the SAFS fellowship as well. That covers monthly tuition, monthly stipend, tuition, and health insurance at the same rate that an RA or a TA-ship would be. We offer TA-ships as well, but that's more on a student choice and a decision between the faculty member and the student. We're really interested in making sure that the majority of your funding isn't about TAing, because it's really hard to conduct research while you're also TAing. But if you want that experience and you're interested in making sure that's part of your portfolio by the time you graduate, by all means, we make that an option. The third way students are funded is through what I would call external fellowships. And those are usually national fellowships like NSF or NOAA Nancy Foster. And that's money that covers your stipend, your tuition, and your health insurance. But that goes with you to whatever institution you want to work with. We often find prospective students who are caught in what I call a little catch-22 in terms of you'll apply to NSF and NSF will say that you're accepted if you're accepted into our program. You'll meet with faculty members who would say, yeah, you're a great fit. We have space, but we don't have funding. So if you receive this NSF funding, we'll offer you admission. So we have lots of strategies of working around that. That's another reason to really reach out to faculty members now and start working with them, because it's a lot of work to put together a proposal for these types of fellowships. And you want to know if that's the right fit for the lab and for the faculty member, and that you're not totally off base with your fellowship proposal. The fourth way that people are funded is through what we call agency agreements. And that's if you have a job and the research that you do for your job relates to the research that you would be doing for your thesis or dissertation. Your employer is willing to give you a time release to sit and take the classes and do the coursework, and often pays for your tuition and then covers your salary and your health insurance while you're here. Those are really interesting funding options. And when you reach out to graduate students, about a third of our graduate students are funded through that option. And I would totally recommend that you ask them, how did you get the job in order to pay for the degree? And then how did you get the degree without the job? It's also one of those sort of, I think, really interesting aspects of our program, because your peers in the program are also colleagues out in the field, and also it's a pretty small network of potential employers once you're graduating, and you meet them as peers or you meet them on your committee with people that are intertwined with NOAA or Washington Fish and Wildlife. I'd call them industry peers or committee members that I think every student interacts with by the time they graduate.
Yamin and John, can you say a little bit about your funding? What supported you or will support you?
So when I started, I received a SAFS fellowship, but my first couple years the nice thing about your SAFS fellowship or your RA agreement is that you can switch funding sources quarter to quarter. So I worked with my advisor, Stephen, and I was able to kind of piece together a quarter of SAFS fellowship and then switched another quarter to work on an RA ship, and then kept kind of tiling those back and forth. And then my third year, I started on an NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program, so that big NSF GRFP grant that a lot of people applied to. And those are yearly funding agreements. So if I start a year with an NSF, I finish out that academic year on my NSF. So I can't switch quarter to quarter like I would a TA ship or a SAFS fellowship or another RA ship.
My experience has been different. I've been funded by a single RA ship the whole time, and that's been from an external funder as part of this large research effort. And fortunately for my situation, they have this long-term vision. So I've been flexible in my timing with my PhD, that the funding goes, for example, 5 to 10 years out.
What kind of conversations do each of you have with your faculty member about funding? Is the responsibility to find the funding on the student, or is it on the faculty member?
In my experience, it's been a combination where we talk about what funding we have available and what funding we have now and kind of work together to make that work. And then my second year, I knew I needed more funding if I wanted to stay and continue with my PhD. And so I worked with my advisor to put together an NSF GRFP application and then turn that in. So I would say, right, like if you want to make sure you're keeping track of your own money because that's your money, but you also want to make sure that your advisor has a pretty good handle on how much funding you have, and when you need help finding funding, that they're able to help you.
Yeah, for me, so the RA ship, I have 5-year cycle of funding. So when I entered as a master's student, I started halfway through the first cycle. And so as I transitioned to a PhD student, I actually helped work with my advisor as well in writing, I can't think of the name, but just writing the new proposal for the next 5-year cycle. So for example, I helped devise research questions in the direction of the research project that we were planning for the next 5 years. But my advisor, for example, handles all the budgetary stuff that's involved with that. So it was a nice experience without having to do all the logistical overhead that might be stressful.
Go ahead. Yeah, I would like to say you're admitted into the program in the graduate program. And there's two things. You can get a master's degree or a PhD degree. Everybody starts at the same level if they don't already have a master's degree. But if you get to a point working with your advisor in your own research program where it's larger than a master's and you want to proceed, you can simply then just transition into the PhD program, which at that
simple
point,
is that?
That's a great question. I mean, what we have to, there's a couple things. One, there has to be support in place from the advisor and the department to financially support a PhD. And also there is a process involved where you kind of write a proposal for the PhD. So it's basically part of your initial couple of years of work. It's bigger and more exciting. You want to go into a PhD, and you submit that to both the committee and then another departmental committee for approval. So John and Yamin, I believe you both actually went through that process, starting here, deciding you wanted to go on for a PhD. Can you say a little bit about the process and the procedures and what you thought about it? Maybe John, you want to go first?
Yeah. So about a year, I would say, or two, I started seriously considering the option, but I wasn't dead set on it because I knew pretty sure I wanted to get my PhD, but I was still weighing the pros and cons of getting a master's first and then the PhD versus bypassing the PhD. And some of the pros and cons I've been told about that. That, for example, you get your master's, at least you have a graduate degree, and then you can advance more naturally in the sense that there's, for example, job opportunities that you want, or there's some specific situations where if you intended to start a PhD but cannot get to it, at least you have the master's degree, for example. Where the bypass, what's appealing is that it's streamlined process to the PhD. What you do for your master's contributes to that program. So that was appealing because my project in particular was fairly big. So I was keen to continue in that same project while kind of also expanding on it and some interesting chapters and questions that I had myself, which was advantageous. And then also the transition itself, where you write a small proposal that's basically what I would consider a draft of your full PhD proposal. You start hinting at what you're going to do for each of your chapters, but you don't go to the extent of drafting a full PhD proposal. So ultimately, I decided to go to that route just because I knew I was going to get my PhD. I was fairly confident that I wasn't going to, for example, leave the program for something just on a master's degree. So that was my motivation there.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience to John. I would say the two things that I also considered is, one, I really liked, because I didn't enter with a master's, I liked entering as a master's student because I always like to consider like a fail safe, or like if I need to leave, right, like what am I getting? Or, if this is not working out, like I can leave and I can get a master's and we can close that chapter and move on. So like for me, I think the biggest consideration when thinking about transitioning internally from that master's to a PhD was what I wanted my research to be. If you are working on something that you really like, but you perhaps want to pivot and think about something different as you dig deeper into a PhD, then closing out that master's and starting that PhD from fresh might be a better option. But for me, I really wanted to expand on the work that I was doing with my master's. And that's why I decided to do that internal transition where I wrote that proposal, as John mentioned, and then got committee approval, got departmental committee approval, and had my master's work contribute to my dissertation work.
I get a lot of questions from prospective students about really specific elements of their application, like whether or not they should take the GRE, which we officially do not require anymore. So we no longer require the GRE. We do not have a specific list of prerequisites, in part, like we mentioned before, because it would be hard to have a list of prerequisites that matched with all of the different kind of research that's being conducted in our program. But that just always makes me want to tell prospective students that it comes back around to the fit with the faculty member. The faculty member reviews your application. The faculty member decides who to offer admission to for their lab. So the faculty member's impression of your CV or your transcript or your particular background, whether it's in natural science or not, it's the faculty member's perspective of that matters. So I can't reiterate it enough that I think the best thing prospective students can do is to reach out to faculty members, get to know faculty members, and really search around to see which faculty member is the right fit for them. One of the best indicators of success from my perspective of students in our program is that match between the student and the faculty member, and making sure that there aren't any big surprises about what life is going to be like here and what life is going to be like working with that particular faculty member.
Thanks, Amy, John, and Yamini for your time to kind of go over a lot of these details about the School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences and the application to the graduate program. We hope for those who've watched this video, have answered many of your questions, but feel free to reach out to us at any time if you have any additional questions.
And
Good.
please,
We look forward to seeing your application.
Yeah.